Your card has been declined. The words were flat, delivered with the casual contempt of a man who enjoyed the small power he wielded. Mark Coulson, the night manager of the Crestview Grand, did not look at the family in front of him. He tapped a finger on the polished granite countertop, a metronome of dismissal. The lobby was a cavern of hushed opulence. Marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting, reflecting the strange silence. A few late-night travelers paused, their gazes a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Phones, almost instinctively, began to rise. That was the first thing Dr. Elias Vance noticed. Not the manager's lie, but the audience it had created. He stood perfectly still, his wife Lena's hand finding his. Their daughter Maya, 12 years old and exhausted from the long drive, leaned against her mother, her eyes wide. Elias felt the weight of dozens of eyes, the familiar heat of a spotlight he hadn't asked for. He kept his posture straight, his hands resting on the handle of his suitcase, visible and unthreatening. What the night manager didn't know, what no one in that lobby knew, was that the card he claimed was declined belonged to the CEO of the parent company that owned this very hotel, and that CEO was about to let the machine of his own making run its course, just to see how broken it truly was. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The journey had begun not with humiliation, but with the scent of fresh coffee and the promise of the open road. It was 5:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in July. Ilya stood in his kitchen, the early morning light painting soft gray lines across the floor. He was performing a ritual. In his hands was a vintage timepiece, a gold watch with a worn leather strap. It had been his father's. He polished the crystal with a soft cloth, his movements slow and deliberate. It was a habit he'd had for 25 years, a small quiet moment to connect with the man who had taught him that patience was a weapon and dignity was a shield. His father, a master carpenter, had built things that lasted. Houses, tables, a legacy of quiet strength. Elias had chosen a different path, but he hoped he was building something that would last too. Lena found him there, leaning against the doorframe, a gentle smile on her face. She held 2 mugs of coffee. "Ready for 21 days of freedom?" she asked. Her voice was the anchor of his life. He took a mug, his fingers brushing hers. "As ready as I'll ever be. 21 days, 504 hours. A rare, contiguous block of time carved out of a life measured in fiscal quarters and board meetings. For the next 3 weeks, he wasn't Elias Vance, CEO of Zenith Hospitality Group. He was just Elias, husband to Lena, father to Maya. They were embarking on their great American road trip, a winding path from their home in Chicago, west toward the mountains, then south through the desert, and finally looping back home. No jets, no conference calls, just the 3 of them, the highway, and a meticulously planned itinerary of national parks, small towns, and roadside diners. Maya, still in her pajamas, padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is it time yet?" "Almost, sleepyhead," Elias said, ruffling her hair. "Go get dressed. The road is calling." By 6:05 a.m., the car was packed, not by a valet or an assistant, but by Elias. Each suitcase, cooler, and bag of snacks was placed with the precision of a surgeon arranging his tools. He had learned a long time ago that control over the small things gave you peace. It was a lesson from his first career, the one before the boardrooms and balance sheets, in the frantic, bloody quiet of a military field hospital. Control what you can, the rest you endure. The first 3 days were a blur of sun-drenched asphalt and rolling green hills. They listened to Maya's pop playlists and Lena's classic soul. They ate at greasy spoons and took pictures at kitschy roadside attractions. Elias felt the corporate armor he wore every day begin to flake away, replaced by the comfortable weight of being a father and a husband. He drove, Lena navigated, and Maya documented everything on her small digital camera. They were a self-contained unit of joy, moving through the world unnoticed, and it was glorious. On the evening of the 3rd day, they rolled into Northwood, a mid-sized city nestled in a river valley. It was a planned overnight stop, a place to sleep in a real bed, have a nice dinner, and recharge before heading into the mountains. Elias had booked a suite at the Crestview Grand, one of Zenith's premium properties. He'd used his personal credit card, under his own name, not his corporate one. He never mixed business with family. The hotel was a jewel in the portfolio, known for its five-star service and impeccable reputation. Or so he thought. They pulled up to the grand entrance at 9:42 p.m. A valet, a young man with a nervous energy, rushed to open their doors. The lobby was as he'd seen in architectural renderings. A soaring atrium, a modern chandelier that looked like frozen fireworks, and acres of polished marble. It was designed to inspire awe, to communicate a seamless world of luxury. It was a world Elias had helped build. He, Lena, and Maya walked toward the front desk, tired but content. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of white tea and something vaguely floral. There were two clerks at the long desk, but one man stood slightly behind them, observing. He had thinning hair, a suit that was a little too tight in the shoulders, and an air of impatient authority. His name tag read, Mark Coulson, Night Manager. Elias waited patiently for the clerk to finish with another guest. When it was their turn, he stepped forward. "Good evening," he said, his voice warm. "Checking in. The name is Vance. Elias Vance." The clerk, a young woman named Sarah, smiled. "Welcome to the Crestview, Mr. Vance." She began typing, and that's when Coulson stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'll take this one, Sarah," he said. His voice was different from the one he'd used minutes later. It was coated in a thin veneer of professionalism. Sarah looked surprised, then shuffled away, casting a worried glance back. Coulson turned his attention to the screen, his face a mask of performative concentration. He typed for a moment, his lips pursed. "Vance," he repeated, drawing the name out as if it tasted unfamiliar. "And you have a reservation for the presidential suite?" The question was loaded, the skepticism barely concealed. "That's correct," Elias said, his voice still level. The first alarm bell went off in his head, not a loud one, a quiet chime, the kind you hear just before the storm. Coulson's eyes flickered from the screen to Elias, then to Lena and Maya, a quick, dismissive appraisal. It was a look Elias had seen 1,000 times in his life, the look of being measured and found wanting. He ignored it. He had spent a lifetime learning to ignore it. "I'm not seeing it," Coulson said, shaking his head. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at Elias. "Are you sure you're at the right hotel?" "I'm quite sure," Elias replied. He felt Lena's hand tighten on his arm. He gave it a gentle squeeze, a silent message. "I've got this. Perhaps you could check again. It was booked 2 months ago. People make mistakes," Coulson said with a shrug. He made a show of tapping a few more keys. Then he sighed, a theatrical exhalation of frustration. "Look, we're fully booked tonight. A big medical conference." He gestured vaguely at the mostly empty lobby. "There's a perfectly acceptable motel down the highway. I'm sure they'd have room for you." The word hung in the air. You. It was a small word, but in that moment it felt vast and heavy. Elias felt his pulse quicken, a low thrum of anger he had learned to control decades ago in places far more dangerous than a hotel lobby. He took a slow, deep breath, counting to 5 in his head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The anger receded, replaced by a cold, clear focus. "I have a confirmation email," Elias said, pulling out his phone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke in the calm, measured tone of a man who dealt in facts. "Confirmation number 74, Bravo 92 Alpha." He offered the phone to Coulson. The manager glanced at it but didn't take it. He dismissed the evidence with a wave of his hand, a gesture of absolute power. That was the second alarm bell. Louder this time, the dismissal of documentation. "Anyone can generate an email," Coulson said, his voice hardening. He was performing now, for the benefit of the staff and the few lingering guests. His hand drifted down, coming to rest on his hip, inches from where a security guard might carry a weapon. A posture of casual threat. "We have a certain standard at the Crestview. We can't just let anyone in." The implication was clear. You don't belong here. You are not the kind of person who stays in a presidential suite. You are a problem that needs to be removed. Lena spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. "My husband gave you the confirmation number. Are you going to look it up, or do you need to call someone who can?" Something moved behind Coulson's eyes, a flicker of rage at being challenged, especially by a black woman. He puffed out his chest, Ma'am, I am the manager. There is no one else to call. Now, as I said, let me see the screen, Elias interrupted. It wasn't a request. It was a calm statement of intent. I can't do that. Guest privacy, Coulson snapped, turning his body to block the monitor. It was a ridiculous excuse, and they both knew it. Then we have a problem, Elias said softly. He wasn't looking at Coulson anymore. He was looking past him, at the Crestview logo on the wall, his logo, the brand he was responsible for. He felt a profound sense of disappointment. Not anger, not yet. That would come later. Right now, it was just a deep, weary sadness. All the memos, the diversity and inclusion initiatives, the corporate retreats focused on the Zenith experience. It all meant nothing if this man, here, on this night, was the face of the company. The only problem here is your refusal to leave, Coulson said, his voice rising. He picked up the desk phone. I'm going to have to call security. Go ahead, Elias said. He did not move. He did not blink. He just stood there, a pillar of calm in the sterile, hostile lobby. He had done nothing wrong, and he would not be made to feel like a criminal. He thought of his father, the carpenter, who always said, measure twice, cut once. Elias had spent his life measuring people. He had Mark Coulson's measure now, a small man hiding behind a title, a coward who used institutional power as a weapon. The security guards arrived. 2 of them, big men who looked uncomfortable. They flanked Coulson, their presence amplifying his authority. This family is trespassing, Coulson announced to them, his voice echoing in the quiet space. They're refusing to leave the premises. I want them escorted out. Escorted out. The words landed like a physical blow. Maya, who had been quiet until now, began to cry softly. Lena wrapped her arms around her, pulling her close, trying to shield her from the ugliness of the moment. Elias felt a surge of protective fury so intense it made his vision swim for a second. He let himself feel it for exactly 3 seconds. Then he converted it into fuel. He looked at Coulson. He looked at the security guards. He looked at the few guests who were now openly recording with their phones. He knew this moment would be documented. He needed to be as well. For the record, Elias said, his voice clear and carrying, my name is Elias Vance. My wife Lena and my daughter Maya, we have a confirmed prepaid reservation for the presidential suite. We have presented our confirmation. The night manager, Mr. Coulson, has refused to honor it, refused to verify it, and is now having us forcibly removed. It is 9:58 p.m. on Thursday, July the 12th. He stated the facts, calmly, precisely, like a surgeon dictating notes during a procedure. Coulson smirked, a small, ugly twitch of his lips. He thought he had won. He thought this was the end of it. Then he said the line, the one that would echo in court filings and HR reports for months to come. Your car has been declined. He said it again, this time with finality, a lie designed to be the final public humiliation, a justification for his actions. Elias simply nodded. He knew, with a certainty that was as solid as the marble beneath his feet, that this was not the end. This was the beginning. He had built the system that gave Mark Coulson his power. Now he was going to use that same system to dismantle him. He reached for his wallet, but not for the card Coulson had just maligned. He pulled out a different one, a simple black business card. He didn't show it to Coulson, not yet. He just held it. He took Lena's hand. Come on, he said softly to her and Maya. Let's go. He led his family toward the large glass doors, walking with his head held high. He did not look back. The security guards shuffled their feet, their job done for them. The lobby felt colder now, the silence heavier. As the glass door swung shut behind the Vance family, a young woman in the corner, a college student named Chloe, stopped recording. She looked down at the footage on her phone. She had the whole thing, the manager's smugness, the father's quiet dignity, the little girl's tears. She didn't know who the family was, but she knew an injustice when she saw one. She saved the video, and she waited. The cold night air was a shock after the refrigerated stillness of the lobby. For a moment, the 3 of them just stood on the pavement under the porte cochere, the engine of their car still warm, the valet hovering awkwardly a few feet away, not knowing what to do. The moment stretched, filled with the city's ambient hum and the weight of what had just happened. Maya's quiet sobs were the only sound between them. Elias felt the anger again, a white-hot spike. It was a different kind of anger than he felt in a boardroom when a subordinate failed to deliver. That was professional frustration. This was personal. This was an attack on his family, on his dignity, on his very right to exist in a space like that. He felt the impulse, the raw primal urge to storm back in there, to unleash the fury he kept so carefully chained, to shout, to demand, to break things. He let himself feel it for exactly 9 seconds, a measured dose of poison. Then he breathed it out. Rage was a blunt instrument. It was loud, messy, and ultimately ineffective. It was what Coulson expected, what he wanted, a reaction that would validate his prejudice. Elias would not give him the satisfaction. What was needed now was not rage. It was precision. Lena, as always, was his anchor in the storm. She looked at him, her eyes searching his. She saw the storm cloud he was wrestling down and put a steadying hand on his chest. "Are you okay?" she asked. It wasn't a question about his feelings. It was a question about his control. He placed his hand over hers. "I'm fine." And he was. The moment of fury had passed, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. "Let's find another hotel. Then we'll deal with this." He tipped the valet, a crisp $50 bill. The young man looked surprised. "Sir, you don't have to—" "It wasn't your fault, son," Elias said. "Have a good night." He got into the driver's seat, the leather cool against his skin. Lena settled in beside him, while Maya curled up in the back, her face hidden. He pulled away from the Crestview Grand, its brilliantly lit facade shrinking in his rearview mirror. He drove for 3 blocks in silence, just the road and the engine and the night air. Then he pulled over. "Okay," he said, turning to face his wife. "Talk to me." Lena took a deep breath. She had been a journalist before Maya was born, a damn good one. She saw the world in structures and systems. "He profiled us. That's the headline. He saw a black family, assumed we were out of place, and looked for a pretext to remove us. The decline card was a lie to give him cover." "I know," Elias said. "He felt powerful," Lena continued, her voice gaining strength. "He enjoyed it. That wasn't just policy, that was personal. Did you see the way he smirked?" "I saw it." In the back, Maya spoke, her voice muffled. "Is it because we're black?" The question hung in the confined space of the car. It was the question Elias and Lena had spent 12 years preparing for and a lifetime dreading. He turned in his seat to look at his daughter. Her face was tear-streaked, her expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. This was the real damage. Not the inconvenience, not the insult to his pride, but this, the theft of his child's innocence. The moment she learned that the world might judge her not by her bright mind or her kind heart, but by the color of her skin. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He opened his door, walked around the car, and got into the back with her. He pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face in his chest. "Sometimes," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he didn't try to hide, "people let ugliness into their hearts. And when they do, they can't see clearly. That man in there, his heart is full of ugliness. He didn't see a doctor and a writer and a brilliant artist. He saw something that didn't fit his small, ugly picture of the world. That is his problem, Maya. His failure, not ours." He held her until her sobs subsided into shuddering breaths. He felt Lena's hand on his shoulder. They were a unit again. Damaged, but not broken. "Dignity is non-negotiable," he said, as much to himself as to his daughter. It was another of his father's sayings. "They can't take it from you. You can only give it away. We didn't give it away tonight." He stayed with Maya until she fell into a weary sleep. Then he got back into the driver's seat. Lena had her laptop open. "The Empyrean Hotel is 4 blocks from here," she said. "It's not one of ours. Independent, 4.5 stars. They have a 2-bedroom suite available." "Book it," he said. They checked into the Empyrean without incident. The night clerk was polite, efficient, and welcoming. The lobby was smaller, less grandiose than the Crestviews, but it was warm. It felt safe. Within 20 minutes, they were in their suite. Elias carried a sleeping Maya into her room and tucked her in. He stood over her bed for a long moment, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. The cold resolve in his gut hardened into something like steel. This wasn't just about a rude manager anymore. This was about the world his daughter would inherit. When he returned to the main room, Lena was sitting on the sofa, a glass of water in her hand. The silence was heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I'm going to dismantle him," Elias said. The words were quiet, devoid of anger, a simple statement of fact. Lena looked at him. She knew this version of her husband. This was the man who had built a hospitality empire from a handful of struggling properties. The man who saw complex problems as systems to be understood and re-engineered. "How?" "By the book," he said. "His book. I'm going to follow the procedure. I'll call the guest complaint line tomorrow morning. I will file a formal report. I will give them every opportunity to do the right thing. I need to see how the system responds to a complaint from a regular person, from an Elias Vance who isn't the CEO." "And when they fail?" Lena asked. It wasn't a question of if, but when. She knew how these things worked. The machine is designed to protect itself. "When they fail," Elias said, walking over to the window and looking out at the city lights, "I will introduce them to the man who designed the machine." He checked his watch. 11:37 p.m. 19 days, 18 hours, and 23 minutes of his vacation remained. The road trip was on hold. A new itinerary had just been written. He knew what would happen next. His complaint would be routed to a regional manager. That manager would pull the incident report filed by Coulson. Coulson, being the kind of man he was, would have already filed a preemptive, self-serving report. He would paint Elias as aggressive, belligerent. He would claim the family was disruptive. The manager, whose bonuses were tied to keeping complaints to a minimum, would back his employee. He would offer a perfunctory apology and maybe a voucher for a free breakfast. He would expect the problem to go away. They always expect the problem to go away. They exhaust you with process, with bureaucracy, with dismissive emails and unreturned phone calls. The system wasn't broken. It was designed to work exactly this way, to grind people down until they give up. But Elias Vance was not going to give up. He had more patience than they could ever imagine, and he had resources they couldn't possibly comprehend. He had spent his life building things. Now he was going to take something apart, piece by piece, starting with a man named Mark Coulson. The next morning, the sun streamed into the suite at the Empyrean Hotel, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The light quality was different here, warmer, less clinical than the harsh, sterile environment of the Crestview. Elias was already awake, had been for hours. He had forgone his usual morning run, instead sitting at the suite's small desk with his laptop, a cup of hotel coffee steaming beside him. He had slept for maybe 2 hours, his mind a whirring engine of strategy and quiet, controlled fury. Lena found him there, dressed in a fresh press shirt and slacks. "You're wearing your armor," she observed quietly. He looked down at his clothes. He hadn't even realized it. Subconsciously, he had prepared for battle. "Force of habit," he said with a wry smile that didn't reach his eyes. Maya emerged, looking more rested. The trauma of the previous night was still there, a shadow behind her eyes, but the resilience of youth was a powerful force. "Are we still going to see the mountains today?" she asked, her voice small. Elias looked at Lena. A silent conversation passed between them. The road trip, their escape from reality, was already compromised. Pushing forward would feel like running away. "We're going to stay here for a little while, sweetie," Lena said, sitting on the edge of the sofa and patting the seat next to her. "Your dad has a little bit of work to take care of." "Work?" Maya's face fell. "But you promised." "No work." "This is a different kind of work," Elias said, turning his chair to face her. "Remember what we talked about last night? About that man's ugly heart?" Maya nodded. "Well, sometimes when you see something ugly, you have a responsibility to try and clean it up, so it doesn't hurt anyone else." He was simplifying it, but that was the essence of it. This was no longer just about his family. It was about every family that might look like his, every person who might be judged and dismissed by a man like Coulson. He gave Maya a task. He asked her to be the lead investigator, to write down everything she remembered from the night before, every word, every look, every detail. He told her her memory was important evidence. It was a way to give her agency, to transform her from a victim into a participant in her own justice. Her eyes lit up. She got a notebook and a pen and sat at the dining table, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was her mother's daughter. At precisely 9 a.m., Elias dialed the Zenith Hospitality Guest Relations hotline. The number was printed on the back of every key card, on every email confirmation. He knew the call tree by heart. He had approved its design. He navigated the automated prompts and was placed on hold. The music was a soothing, generic classical piece he had personally signed off on. The irony was not lost on him. After 9 minutes and 32 seconds, he timed it, a cheerful voice answered. "Thank you for calling Zenith Guest Relations. This is Brenda. How can I help you create a memorable experience today?" Elias took a breath. Phase 1 was engaged. He was now just a customer. "Brenda, my name is Elias Vance. I'm calling to file a formal complaint about my experience at the Crestview Grand in Northwood last night." He recounted the events of the previous evening. He was factual, unemotional, and precise. He used the exact language Coulson had used. He mentioned the fabricated claim of a declined card. He noted the time. He gave the names of his wife and daughter. He spoke for 7 minutes without interruption. Brenda was quiet for a moment. Her cheerful tone was gone, replaced by a practiced, empathetic script. "Mr. Vance, I am so sorry to hear that. That is not the standard of service we strive for at Zenith. I can only imagine how upsetting that must have been for you and your family." "I'm not looking for empathy, Brenda," Elias said, his voice still calm. "I'm looking for accountability. What is the process from here?" "Of course, sir. I have opened a case file for you. Case number 815 Echo. The report will be forwarded to the hotel's regional director for review. They are required to investigate and respond to you within 72 business hours." 72 hours. 3 days. A lifetime in customer service. An eternity for a family stranded in a city they didn't know. It was a cooling off period, designed to let anger dissipate. "And who is the regional director?" Elias asked. "That would be Mr. Alan Croft," Brenda said. Elias knew the name. Alan Croft, a company man. 20 years with Zenith, started as a bellhop. Worked his way up. On paper, he was a success story. In reality, Elias knew. Croft was a protector of the status quo. His region had the highest numbers for profitability, but also the highest rates of employee turnover and the most sealed HR complaints. Croft was a manager who valued clean reports over clean practices. He was the mid-level protector, the second layer of the machine. "Thank you, Brenda," Elias said. "Please ensure Mr. Croft receives the report today. I will await his call." He hung up. That was step 1. He had fed his complaint into the designated channel. Now, he would wait and see how the machine digested it. He spent the rest of the day with Lena and Maya. They went to a museum. They had lunch at a small cafe. They tried to salvage a day of their vacation, but the cloud of the previous night hung over them. Elias found himself checking his phone every few minutes. He was counting things again. Steps, breaths, hours. The call from Alan Croft came the next afternoon, well inside the 72-hour window. Croft was efficient, if nothing else. "Mr. Vance, Alan Croft here, Regional Director for Zenith. I'm calling about the complaint you filed." Croft's voice was smooth, polished, the voice of a man who spent his days defusing conflict. "Mr. Croft," Elias said, putting the phone on speaker so Lena could hear. "Listen, first and foremost, I want to apologize on behalf of the Crestview Grand. We clearly dropped the ball on your arrival, and for that I am truly sorry. That's not the welcome we want for any of our guests." It was a perfect corporate non-apology. An apology for the outcome, not the action. "Mr. Croft, was my family racially profiled by your night manager?" Elias asked. He cut straight through the script. There was a pause, a fractional hesitation. "That's a very serious allegation, Mr. Vance, and I can assure you we take allegations of that nature very seriously. I've spoken with my night manager, Mr. Coulson, and I've reviewed his report from the evening." "And what did his report say?" Elias asked, already knowing the answer. "Well, there seems to have been a misunderstanding," Croft began. "Mark, Mr. Coulson, indicated that your party was, well, that there was some confusion about the reservation and that you became agitated." "Agitated," Elias repeated the word. It was tasteless in his mouth. "I see. So his report states that I was the aggressor." "I wouldn't use that word," Croft said smoothly, but he was concerned about the comfort of other guests. He made a judgment call, perhaps not the right one, in hindsight. He's a long-time employee, a good manager. I think his wires just got crossed. There it was. The protection. The closing of ranks. Coulson wasn't a rogue agent. He was a good manager. His racism wasn't racism. It was crossed wires. And the declined credit card? Elias pressed. Was that also a misunderstanding? Another pause. There was a glitch in the system, Croft said. The lie was so bald, so effortless, it was almost impressive. By the time the system corrected, you had already left. A technical error. It happens. A technical error. That was the official story. The machine was generating its own reality, one that absolved its operators of any wrongdoing. Mr. Croft, Elias said, his voice dropping to a lower register, a tone he used in boardrooms just before he fired someone. Let me be very clear. Your manager lied. He did so because he did not believe my family belonged in your hotel. You are now covering for his lie. Is that the official position of Zenith Hospitality? Now, let's not be inflammatory, Mr. Vance, Croft said, his smooth tone cracking just a little. We want to make this right. I'd like to offer you and your family a complimentary 2-night stay in the presidential suite at your convenience, along with a dinner certificate for our restaurant, a $3,000 value. We just need you to sign a standard release form acknowledging the matter is settled. A standard release form. An NDA. They wanted to buy his silence for $3,000. They had put a price on his family's humiliation. That was the moment the last shred of hope that the system would correct itself died. The machine was working perfectly. It was protecting itself. It was trying to make the problem, him, disappear. I'll consider your offer, Mr. Croft, Lewis said, his voice a flat, cold plain. You'll be hearing from me. He ended the call. He looked at Lena. Her face was a mask of cold fury. A technical error, she whispered, shaking her head. They're not just going to get away with this, Elias. No, he said. They're not. He picked up his phone again. He opened a new message, not to his corporate team, not yet. He typed a simple post on his private, non-public social media page, the one he used to connect with old Army buddies and college friends. My family and I had a deeply troubling experience with what appears to be racial profiling at the Crestview Grand in Northwood. If anyone was in the lobby on the evening of July 12th around 9:45 p.m. and saw anything, I would appreciate you contacting me. He hit post. He had planted a seed. Now he would see if anything grew. 18 days of his vacation remained. The clock was ticking. The response came faster than he could have imagined. Within 2 hours, a private message landed in his inbox. The profile picture was of a young woman with bright pink hair. Her name was Chloe Martinez. Hi, I think I was there, the message began. I'm a student at Northwood University. I was in the lobby studying. I saw the whole thing. The manager was a total jerk. I'm so sorry that happened to you and your family. Elias's heart beat a little faster. The witness. He typed back immediately. Thank you for reaching out, Chloe. I appreciate that. It's no problem, she replied instantly. The way he spoke to you and your poor daughter, it was disgusting. I was so mad. A new message bubble appeared. I recorded it. Elias stared at the words on his screen. I recorded it. 3 words that changed everything. The entire architecture of the lie constructed by Coulson and Croft was predicated on it being his word against theirs. A video was objective. A video was irrefutable. Chloe, he typed, his fingers flying across the keyboard. That footage is critically important. Would you be willing to share it? Of course, she wrote, but I don't want to just post it online. I feel like that would turn into a big mess and might not actually help. It feels like it should be used, I don't know, properly. Elias felt a surge of admiration for this young woman. She had the wisdom to understand that a viral moment was not the same as justice. Justice required strategy. You are absolutely right, Chloe, he replied. The best thing you can do right now is hold on to that video. Don't share it with anyone. Just keep it safe. Can you do that for me? Can you trust me that we are building a case and your evidence will be the cornerstone? He was asking for a leap of faith, for a stranger to trust another stranger on the internet. There was a long pause. He could almost feel her thinking on the other end of the line. Then the reply came. Okay, I'll hold it. Just make that guy pay. Not with money, with, I don't know, Make it right. I promise, Elias typed, and he meant it. He closed the laptop. One ally had emerged, a young woman with a phone and a conscience, but he knew it wasn't enough. The video would prove the event, but it wouldn't prove the pattern. To truly dismantle the machine, he needed to show that Coulson wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of a deeper disease. He needed someone from the inside. That evening, as Lena and Maya were watching a movie, Elias felt a restlessness he couldn't shake. He needed to see the place again. He put on a baseball cap and a simple jacket, obscuring his features. He walked the 4 blocks back to the Crestview Grand. He didn't go in the front. He walked around the side, past the employee entrance where smokers were taking their 10-minute breaks. He saw her there. Sarah, the young clerk from the front desk, the one Coulson had dismissed. She was sitting on a low brick wall, staring at her phone, her face etched with misery. She wasn't smoking. She was just sitting in the cool night air, radiating guilt. Elias almost walked past. This wasn't part of the plan, but something in her posture, a familiar kind of despair, made him stop. He walked over, keeping his face in the shadows. "Tough night?" he asked, his voice gentle. She jumped, startled. She looked up, and a flicker of recognition, then horror, crossed her face. You're the man from last night. My name is Elias Vance." "Oh God," she said, burying her face in her hands. "I am so sorry. What he did, it was wrong. I wanted to say something, but Mr. Coulson, he's—" "I know what he is," Elias said. "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is," she said, looking up, tears welling in her eyes. "It is my fault. I stood there. I let it happen, and it's not the first time. He does this. Not always this bad, but he has a list, an unofficial one. Guests, he decides, are problematic before they even speak. He flags their reservations. He finds reasons. A funny smell from the room, a noise complaint from a neighbor that never happened. He gets them removed. And Mr. Croft, the regional manager, he signs off on it every time. He calls it maintaining the brand's integrity." The insider. She hadn't just witnessed one incident. She had witnessed the system. "Why are you telling me this?" Elias asked softly. "Because I saw your daughter's face," Sarah said, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "And I have a little brother. And I can't be a part of it anymore. I'm quitting tomorrow." "Don't quit," Elias said, the strategy crystallizing in his mind. "Not yet. Quitting helps him. It removes a witness. If you really want to help, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go back in there and do your job. But I need you to pay attention. I need you to document. Dates, times, names, any email from Coulson or Croft about these problematic guests. Any falsified report you see. Can you do that?" She looked terrified. "He'll fire me, or worse." "The truth is a shield, Sarah," Elias said, echoing his father's wisdom in a new context. "He can only hurt you if you're alone. You're not alone anymore. Just gather the information. Send it to a private email address. And when the time is right, I promise you, you will be protected." He gave her a burner email he had set up that afternoon. She stared at it, then nodded slowly, a newfound resolve hardening her features. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll do it." He walked away, melting back into the shadows. He now had a witness with irrefutable video evidence and an insider with access to the paper trail of corruption. But there was still a missing piece. The history, the context. Coulson and Croft hadn't invented this brand of bigotry. They were just carrying a torch that had been passed down. To prove the systemic nature of the problem, he needed to find someone who had seen the torch passed. He needed an elder. Lena, with her journalist's instincts, found him. While Elias was focused on the present, she had started digging into the past. She spent a day searching online archives of the local newspaper, looking for any mention of discrimination lawsuits or complaints against the Crestview Grand. She found a few small articles from years ago, all settled out of court, the details sealed. But one name appeared as a source in an article from 15 years prior, a story about unfair labor practices at the hotel. A bellhop named William Abernathy. A quick search of the hotel's current employee roster, a document Elias had access to with a few keystrokes from his corporate login, a tool he hadn't used yet, showed that a William Abernathy was still employed there. 42 years of service. "He's the one," Lena said, pointing to the screen. He's the institutional memory. Getting to him was delicate. They couldn't just call him. The hotel monitored employee communications, so Elias did something old-fashioned. He went back to the hotel the next day, during the midday lull. He wasn't wearing a hat this time. He walked into the lobby, cool and confident. A different manager was on duty, a woman who looked at him with a flicker of recognition and fear. Croft had clearly circulated a warning. Elias ignored her. He walked over to the bell stand. An older black man, his back straight despite his age, his uniform immaculate, was polishing the brass luggage cart. His name tag read Abernathy, the elder. Elias stood beside him, not speaking, simply looking at the cart. Mr. Abernathy continued his work, his movements practiced and economical. Good brass holds a shine a long time, Elias said quietly. If you polish it right. Mr. Abernathy paused his work. He looked at Elias, his eyes wise and weary. They had seen more than 40 years of guests come and go. It does indeed, he said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. But you still got to put in the work every day. Tarnish has a way of creeping back in. They stood in silence for a moment, two black men from different generations, understanding each other perfectly without saying what they meant. I saw you the other night, mister, Abernathy said, his voice barely a whisper. With your family. It wasn't right. It's been happening for a long time, hasn't it? Elias asked. Mr. Abernathy nodded slowly. Different managers, same story. They changed the wallpaper, but the foundation stays the same. He looked around the opulent lobby. This place has ghosts. I'm looking for them, Elias said. Mr. Abernathy looked him in the eye, a long, appraising stare. He was taking his own measure of the man. Elias met his gaze without flinching. He saw a man who had endured, who had watched and waited. I get off at 4, Mr. Abernathy said. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks south, the Daily Grind. I'll be there at 4:15. It wasn't a question. It was an assignation. I'll be there, Elias said. At 4:15 p.m., Elias and Lena were sitting in a warm booth at the Daily Grind. The coffee shop was old, smelled of burnt coffee and sugar, and felt a world away from the sterile luxury of the Crestview. Mister Abernathy walked in, out of his uniform now, wearing a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He carried a worn leather satchel. He looked like a history professor, not a bellhop. He sat down opposite them and placed the satchel on the table. He didn't say a word. He simply opened it and took out a thick, ledger-style notebook. It was bound in black leather, the corners soft and frayed with age. He opened it. The pages were filled with neat, precise handwriting, dates, names, room numbers, brief, factual descriptions of events. March 12, 1988. Johnson family. 3 kids. Manager claimed their reservation was lost. Sent them to the motel by the highway. June 5th, 1997. Mr. and Mrs. Patel. Medical doctors. Manager called security on them for a noise complaint from an empty adjacent room. December 22nd, 2005. The Reverend Michael Lee and his choir in town for a Christmas concert. Manager told them the hotel had a no large groups policy, though a white fraternity was checked in on the same floor. Page after page, year after year, a secret history of the Crestview Grand. It was a meticulous record of everyday racism, of indignities large and small. Mark Coulson wasn't an anomaly. He was the tradition. My father told me to write things down, Mr. Abernathy said softly, his hand resting on the open page. He said people's memories fade, but the ink stays. I've been the bellhop here for 42 years. I see who comes in, and I see who gets turned away. This was it, the box of evidence. Not just a box, but a library, a multi-generational testament to the systemic rot at the heart of the hotel. Why? Lena asked, her voice filled with awe. Why keep this all these years? Because I knew one day someone would come along who could do something with it, Mr. Abernathy said, looking directly at Elias. Someone with the right kind of strength. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that lasts. Elias felt a weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders that was heavier than any quarterly report. This wasn't just his fight anymore. He was now the steward of 40 years of buried pain, of silenced voices. May we? Elias asked, gesturing to the notebook. Mr. Abernathy slid the book across the table. It's not mine anymore, he said. It's yours. The next morning, the email from Alan Croft's office arrived. It was a formal letter attached as a PDF. It reiterated the offer, the complimentary stay, the dinner, the $3,000 value, and at the bottom, a link to the digital release form. The NDA, Elias read it, then forwarded it to Lena, who was in the other room with Maya, going through Mr. Abernathy's logbook, cross-referencing dates with old news reports. A few minutes later, an email arrived from Sarah, the front desk clerk. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained a single attachment, a scanned copy of Mark Coulson's incident report from the night of their arrival. Elias opened it. It was exactly as he'd expected, only worse. Coulson had written a piece of fiction, describing Elias as verbally aggressive and physically intimidating. He claimed Elias had slammed his fist on the counter and used profane language, causing his daughter to cry. He noted that he had de-escalated the situation by calling security to protect the other guests and his staff. At the bottom was a signature from Alan Croft, countersigning the report as reviewed and accepted. It was dated the morning after the incident. Croft hadn't investigated anything. He had colluded. Elias printed the offer letter from Croft and the falsified report from Coulson. He placed them side by side on the hotel desk. The offer and the lie. The carrot and the stick. This was the system in its purest form. He picked up his phone. He had all the pieces now. The witness, the insider, the elder, the irrefutable proof of the event, the paper trail of the cover-up, and the historical context of the pattern. He had followed their process. He had given them every chance to do the right thing. They had chosen, at every turn, to double down on the lie. There was only one call left to make. He walked to the window of the suite. The sun was high in the sky. It was day 6 of his 21-day vacation. 17 days remaining. It felt like a lifetime ago that he had been polishing his father's watch, dreaming of the open road. The road had led him here, to this room, to this moment. Perhaps this was the real work. He found the number in his contacts. It was a direct line, one he rarely used. A voice answered on the first ring, crisp and professional. Jessica Riley, Chief Legal Officer for Zenith Hospitality Group, a brilliant, tenacious lawyer who had been his first hire after taking the CEO job. She was loyal to the company, but more than that, she was loyal to the law and to the idea of what the company was supposed to be. Jessica, it's Elias. There was a half second of surprise in her voice. He never called her on her direct line, unless it was a 5-alarm fire. Elias, is everything all right? I thought you were on the road. I am, he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of the past 6 days. We have a problem, a big one, at the Crestview Grand in Northwood. He heard the sound of a keyboard clicking on her end. She was already pulling up the file on the property. The Crestview, she repeated. Croft's region. What's going on? Market manipulation? Embezzlement? Worse, Elias said. He looked at the falsified report on the desk. He thought of Maya's face. He thought of Mr. Abernathy's 42 years of silent witness. Rot. The kind you can't see on a balance sheet. He then told her everything. He started with the drive, the feeling of freedom. He described the lobby, the look on Coulson's face, the words that were said. He told her about the falsified report, about Croft's dismissive call, about the insulting offer of settlement. He told her about Chloe's video, Sarah's emails, and Mr. Abernathy's logbook. He laid out the entire case, not as a CEO to his lawyer, but as a man whose family had been wronged. Jessica listened without interruption. When he was finished, the silence on the line was profound. It lasted for about 15 seconds. Jessica, he finally said. I'm here, Elias, she said. Her voice had changed. The professional warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and sharp, like the edge of a blade. I'm looking at Alan Croft's personnel file and Mark Coulson's. There are patterns, complaints that were settled at the regional level that never made it to corporate, all with NDAs. I'm not signing one, Elias said. You won't have to, she replied. Elias, what do you want to do? It was the most important question. She was asking if this was a personal matter to be settled or a corporate matter to be prosecuted. Elias looked over at the other room, where he could hear Maya laughing at something Lena had said. The sound was the answer. I want you to burn it to the ground, he said. the whole rotten structure. Coulson, Croft, the system that protected them. I want you to use every tool at your disposal. Audits, investigations, terminations. I want a public reckoning. And then I want you to help me build something better in its place. Consider it done, Jessica said. There was no hesitation. I'm chartering a jet. My team and I will be on the ground in Northwood by morning. We'll operate out of the Empyrean. Don't talk to anyone else from the company. Don't answer any more calls from Croft. You are no longer a complainant, Elias. You are the primary witness for the corporation in an internal investigation against its own management. The power dynamic has shifted. Irreversibly. The hunter was now the hunted. One more thing, Jessica, Elias said. Anything. When your team arrives, I want them to be diverse. I want the lead auditor to be a black woman. I want the lead investigator to be Latino. I want the people who walk into that hotel to represent the world as it is, not the world as Mark Coulson thinks it should be. I already have the team in mind, she said. They'll be there. He hung up the phone. He felt a sense of release, but not relief. The decision had been made. The counterattack was in motion. He walked back into the living area of the suite. Lena looked up at him, a question in her eyes. The cavalry is coming, he said. The arrival of Jessica Riley and her team was not a dramatic front-page affair. It was quiet, precise, and utterly terrifying for those who knew what it meant. At 10 a.m. the next day, a black SUV pulled up to the Empyrean Hotel. 4 people got out. Jessica Riley, sharp and focused in a dark pantsuit. Beside her, a tall, elegant black woman in her 50s, Amelia Jones, the company's top forensic auditor. Following them were 2 men, David Chen, a data security expert, and Marcus Thorne, a former FBI agent who now headed Zenith's internal investigations. They were the company's elite, the cleaners, the people you called when a problem couldn't be solved. It had to be excised. They met in the conference room Elias had booked at the Empyrean. The table was covered with documents, printouts of Sarah's emails, a timeline Lena had created, and a copy of the first few dozen pages of Mr. Abernathy's logbook. Chloe Martinez had arrived 20 minutes earlier, a nervous but determined presence. She had her laptop with her. Jessica got straight to business. Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming. Mr. Thorne will take your formal statement. We will also need a copy of that video file, for which you will be compensated for your time and evidence. Chloe nodded, relieved to be taken seriously. She was escorted to an adjacent room by Marcus Thorne. Jessica then turned to Elias and Lena. Amelia's team will begin a full, unannounced audit of the Crestview's financials and operational logs, effective immediately. They'll be looking for discrepancies in billing, guest compensation, and security reports, specifically anything signed off by Coulson or Croft. David will be performing a deep dive on their internal communications. Emails, instant messages, everything. We're looking for keywords: problem guest, agitator, security risk, and the names from Mr. Abernathy's journal. Amelia Jones, the auditor, spoke for the first time. Her voice was deep and resonant, the voice of someone used to delivering bad news. Mr. Vance, with your permission, we'd like to cross-reference the names in this logbook with Zenith's central reservation database going back 40 years. We can search for their names and see if they have subsequent stays at any of our other properties. My hypothesis is that they won't. A bad experience, especially one rooted in discrimination, doesn't just lose you a customer for one hotel. It loses you that customer for the brand, for life. It was a metric Elias had never considered. The long-term, invisible cost of bigotry. The plan was simple. Overwhelming force, applied with surgical precision. While the audit and data mining happened in the background, Marcus Thorne would conduct a series of interviews. He would start at the bottom with the line staff, valets, housekeepers, kitchen staff, and work his way up. He wouldn't ask about the Vance incident directly. He would ask about the hotel's culture, about management, about fairness. He would build a mosaic of the hotel's inner life, one piece at a time. The interviews with Coulson and Croft would be last. They would be brought into a room, separated, and confronted with a mountain of evidence they didn't know existed. They'll lawyer up, Elias said. Let them, Jessica said with a thin smile. It will be on their own dime. This is an internal corporate matter. Their employment contracts have a cooperation clause. Refusal to answer is grounds for immediate termination for cause. For the next 48 hours, the Empyrean Hotel became the war room. Elias and Lena stayed out of the direct investigation, allowing Jessica's team to work. They were witnesses now, not commanders. They took Maya to a park. They went to the movies. They tried to maintain a bubble of normalcy in the eye of the hurricane, but the countdown tension was ever present. 16 days of vacation left. 15. Sarah, the front desk clerk, was interviewed by Thorne at a neutral off-site location. She tearfully gave her statement and handed over a flash drive with every suspicious email she had saved over the past year. Her bravery gave others courage. The valet from that night confirmed that the Vance family had been calm and polite. A housekeeper from the 7th floor reported that she had been instructed by Coulson on multiple occasions to file false reports about marijuana smells from rooms occupied by young black men, pretext for eviction. The data started to pour in. David Chen discovered a shadow email system Coulson and Croft used, a private server to discuss problematic guests, bypassing corporate servers. Amelia Jones's audit found a slush fund, disguised as guest relations expenses, that Croft used to pay small cash settlements to people who complained, all tied to ND. As he administered at the regional level, hiding the pattern from corporate, and Mr. Abernathy's logbook became the Rosetta Stone for the entire investigation. Name after name from his journal was cross-referenced. Amelia Jones was right. Of the 172 distinct individuals or families noted in the logbook over 4 decades, not a single one had ever booked a room at any Zenith property ever again. It was a silent exodus of paying customers, a multi-million-dollar loss, hidden in plain sight. On the morning of the 3rd day, Jessica Riley decided it was time. We're ready for Coulson and Croft. The setting for the final confrontation was a conference room at the Crestview Grand itself. Jessica had requisitioned it. It was a power move, designed to put them on the defensive on their own turf. Mark Coulson was called in first. He swaggered in, a look of annoyance on his face. He saw Marcus Thorne, a large, imposing black man in a suit, and Jessica Riley, a woman he didn't recognize. "I'm busy," Coulson snapped. "What is this about?" "Sit down, Mr. Coulson," Jessica said. Her voice was quiet, but it commanded the room. Coulson sat, a smirk on his face. He still thought he was in control. "We're here to discuss the events of July 12th. Regarding the Vance family," Jessica began. "Oh, for God's sake," Coulson sighed. "Is that what this is about?" "Alan handled it. The guy was a troublemaker. I made the right call." "Your report states that Mr. Vance was verbally aggressive and slammed his fist on the counter," Thorne said, reading from the document. "That's right," Coulson said, nodding. "He was out of control." Thorne tapped his laptop. He turned the screen toward Coulson. On it was Chloe's video. It was crystal clear, the audio perfect. It showed the entire 12-minute interaction. It showed Elias, calm and composed. It showed Lena, protective and dignified. It showed Coulson's sneer, his dismissive wave of the hand, his smug delivery of the line about the declined card. It showed a reality completely at odds with Coulson's report. Coulson's face went pale. The smirk vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed panic. The blood drained from his face. That's been edited. It's a deepfake. They're trying to frame me." "We have the original file with the metadata, Mr. Coulson," Thorne said, his voice flat. "We also have a sworn statement from the young woman who filmed it. We also have your falsified report, which you filed at 10:15 p.m. that night, a full 20 minutes after the incident. A report you had countersigned by Mr. Croft by 8 a.m. the next morning, before any investigation could have taken place." Jessica slid a stack of papers across the table. "These are emails between you and Mr. Croft, discussing other problem guests. This is the testimony of 6 of your employees, detailing a pattern of discriminatory behavior. This is a forensic audit of your guest compensation budget, which appears to be a slush fund for silencing complaints." Coulson looked at the mountain of paper. He looked at Thorne. He looked at Jessica. The bravado was gone. He was a cornered animal. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I have rights." "You have the right to be terminated for cause, effective immediately, for gross misconduct, falsification of corporate documents, and violation of federal anti-discrimination laws," Jessica said coldly. "Security will escort you from the building. Your personal effects will be mailed to you. You are not to set foot on any Zenith property ever again. A copy of our investigation will be forwarded to the district attorney's office and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Coulson didn't speak. He just stared. The man who had built his identity on the power to escort others out was now facing the same fate. Alan Croft's interview was shorter. He came in smiling, ready to smooth things over. He saw the look on Jessica's face and his smile died. He was shown the same evidence. He tried to blame Coulson. He tried to claim he was just signing off on his manager's report. "You are the regional director, Mr. Croft," Jessica said. "Your job is oversight. Instead, you were a co-conspirator. You enabled this behavior. You covered it up. You actively hid a pattern of discrimination from this corporation, costing us millions in lost revenue and exposing us to billions in legal liability." Croft began to sweat. "Look, we can fix this. I can fix this." "No," Jessica said. "You can't. Your career with Zenith Hospitality is over. We've already been in touch with your lawyer. He's advising you to sign the resignation papers. We advise you to take his advice." Croft, the company man, the political animal, saw the game was over. There was no one left to call, no favor to cash in. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and utterly defeated. He signed the papers. The reckoning was swift, but it was not quiet. Jessica Riley, acting on Elias's instructions, did not let the matter die with the firings. The next day, she called an all-hands meeting for every employee of the Crestview Grand. The meeting was held in the hotel's main ballroom. Elias, Lena, and Maya were not there. This was not about them anymore. Jessica stood at the podium. Amelia Jones, Marcus Thorne, and David Chin stood behind her. Mr. Abernathy sat in the front row, a guest of honor. Sarah stood with the other front desk staff, her head held high. Jessica laid it all out. She did not name the Vance family. She didn't have to. She described a pattern of behavior, of management that fostered a culture of fear and discrimination. She announced the immediate terminations of Coulson and Croft. A gasp went through the room. Then came the most important part. She announced the creation of a new independent oversight committee for the entire region, to be chaired by Amelia Jones. She announced a complete overhaul of the complaint process, with direct, confidential reporting to corporate, bypassing regional management. She announced a new training program developed in partnership with civil rights organizations, mandatory for every employee from the CEO down. And then she pointed to Mr. Abernathy. "This hotel's greatest asset isn't its marble floors or its fancy chandeliers," she said, her voice ringing with passion. "It's people like William Abernathy, who has served this hotel with dignity and integrity for 42 years. In his honor, Zenith is establishing the Abernathy Grant, a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth in the Northwood community who wish to pursue a career in hospitality. To ensure the sins of the past are not repeated, we must invest in a better future." The applause started slowly, then grew. It was tentative at first, then cathartic. It was the sound of a long-held breath being released. Later that day, a security guard, the same one who had been on duty the night the Vances were removed, escorted Mark Coulson from the HR office to the front door. Coulson carried a small cardboard box with a few personal items. He was not allowed to use the employee exit. He had to walk through the lobby, the grand, opulent lobby he had lorded over for years. Mr. Abernathy was at his post by the door. He didn't say a word. He just stood, his posture perfect, and held the door open for Mr. Coulson as he stepped out of the Crestview Grand for the last time. The irony was situational, and it was absolute. 3 months later, the autumn air was crisp, and the leaves in the river valley had turned to brilliant shades of gold and red. A familiar car pulled up to the entrance of the Crestview Grand. Elias, Lena, and Maya stepped out. The road trip had been completed, a journey that had been transformed from a simple vacation into a pilgrimage for justice. The hotel felt different. The air was the same. The marble was just as polished, but the atmosphere had changed. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by a low, pleasant hum of conversation. The staff seemed more relaxed, their smiles genuine. A woman in a sharp manager's suit approached them. She was a young, energetic Latina woman who had been promoted from another Zenith property. "Dr. Vance, Mrs. Vance, Maya, welcome to the Crestview. We've been expecting you." She didn't say, "Welcome back." She knew better. This was a new beginning. They were shown to the presidential suite. It was beautiful, with panoramic views of the city and the colorful valley. But it was just a room. The real change was not in the suite, but in the soul of the building. The next morning, they went down for breakfast in the hotel's cafe. They sat by a window, the morning sun streaming in. Mr. Abernathy, now retired but a frequent guest of the hotel, was sitting at a nearby table reading the newspaper. He saw them and came over. "Dr. Vance, Lena, young Maya," he said, his eyes twinkling. "It is good to see you here." "It's good to be here, William," Elias said, standing to shake his hand. They talked for a few minutes. Mr. Abernathy told them about the first recipients of the scholarship, 2 bright kids from his neighborhood. Sarah, he said, had been promoted to front desk supervisor. The whole culture was changing. Slowly, but surely. After Mr. Abernathy left, Elias sat back in his chair. He looked at Lena, who was watching Maya sketch the view from the window in a small notebook. His family. Whole, happy, and safe. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his father's watch. The crystal was gleaming in the morning light. He held it in his palm, the worn leather soft against his skin. He hadn't just dismantled a broken thing. He had, with the help of good people, begun to build something better, something that might last. The road trip had ended, but the real journey, the one to make sure that no other family would have to endure what his had, was just beginning. And he had all the time in the world. He had 14 days of vacation left. He smiled. He would use them well. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.